Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy. Norm and Mike. It's Thursday. I got to give Mike some credit. Yesterday we talked a little bit about the shocking murder-suicide in Las Vegas involving attorney Joe Houston, who apparently murdered his former daughter-in-law and her husband, his former partner, and then turned the gun on himself. And as part of while at a deposition involving custody of his son's child with his former daughter-in-law. I mean, these are kind of complicated things, especially for those of us who are only children. You kind of get to in-law, first, second, third cousin, and you sort of need a roster to know where everybody is. But in any case, Mike was advancing the proposition that maybe there was a twisted and elegant logic to what Joe did, because basically he solved the custody problem for his son. And, I was resisting that because I was so much in shock over the murder and horrified by it that all I could think about were these passions unbound. But as I was driving along, I thought, maybe it makes sense. And of course, and not that it's justified, but, as Pascal once said, the heart has reasons that reasons know not. And so what we learn about Joe Houston this morning is, he told others, I've not seen the medical reports, but he's told others that he had a fatal medical condition, a fatal cancer. And so if you're Joe Houston, life is going to end, as it does for all of us, especially once you get a little older. You realize your years are numbered and you cherish the day. So what can he do to make the world a better place for those he loved? He can provide a solution to his son's custody problems. Yeah, I get it. But, maybe in the animal kingdom, two boars in dispute over something can decide to gore one another, and the survivor wins and the other one dies. That's just not how we do it in human terms. And so while I understand Joe Houston's motivations, I just remain in shock over what he did. He's a trial lawyer. He's one of us.
And that's why I think I introduced it yesterday. I do remember saying that this represents a really cynical view. From my perspective, this is, there's a bunch of attorneys involved in this, right? I mean, on both sides of the equation for the custody dispute, the divorce, and then the father that apparently shot both of these other attorneys, one that was being deposed in front of another pregnant woman, another pregnant lawyer that was actually in the conference room, and he allowed to leave at her request, right? During the middle of it. I think that this represents a really cynical view of the process, especially with family law. But Norm, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I have, clients that are of means, are very well educated and very successful and extraordinary in their own right. And their encounters with the legal system in the last several years, principally within the confines of litigation on the civil side, I think give me an intuitive understanding of how cynical this ultimately was, because it is as if you're inside the mind of attorneys that can skip to the end very quickly, because this is within the realm in which they practice. And if the father made some sort of assumption or some sort of conclusion that meant that his son would continue to suffer unless something radical changed, that, in other words, the process would not ever give to him a sense of justice or equity under the law, right? That he would exact that on his own terms. And I think that
but now the son has to live with the memory of witnessing the murder and suicide.
I get it. I'm not saying it's perfect. Rational. Yeah, I'm not saying it's perfect by any stretch of the imagination.
You think?
Right? And there are obvious, consequences, first order consequences of this, especially considering now the children lose their grandfather and their mother and their, ostensible stepfather. They have to grow up learning of the contentious and aggressive and pretty crazy nature about the loss thereof. And the dad has to figure out a way and he's already having to ward off allegations that he knew it was coming, right?
This just sounds like something out of William Faulkner to me. I mean, it's that dark. And
it's dark, very dark.
I think that I spend a lot of time these days in the morning with the Roman Catholic Missal in prayer and looking up, as it were, and trying to wrap my head around the world's mysteries, and express a sense of gratitude for being in the world and a recipient of divine grace. And some of you are thinking, what does this have to do with law and legitimacy? Maybe everything, maybe nothing. Maybe God is forever present, but always just out of view, and it takes the eyes of faith and a personal crisis to get out of your head, into your heart, into your soul, and into your spirit. I think that Joe Houston, lost his way. I mean, I think that if Augustine is right, and that sin is love of the wrong thing, I think that Joe came to love his image of his family more than he came to love his image of his family. It radically depended on the will of a loving God. And maybe that just can't be helped. I don't know.
Yeah, Dom points this out, and this is I only bring this up, and I know that we didn't plan to spend this much time on it, so after this we can move on. But Don says, I would think the dead mother's parents might continue to dispute custody. After the stream yesterday, I was talking to my law partner, and we both started kind of spitballing about what the next steps would be. And obviously, both there are at least 3 estates that are now involved in this, right? The mother's estate, the dead spouse's estate, and the grandfather, his estate as well. And there will be civil suits to be filed, right? The law firm is now going to have to ward off. I mean, the law does not stop just because the lawyers practicing took an unfortunate end, right?
No, and that's the unfortunate thing. It becomes a bonanza for lawyers. At what point does the pain end?
Well, is that not the essential question that I think Joe was asking in this case? I think that's what I'm saying, is that at what point does my son's suffering end within all of this?
Well, not now.
No, and not in that circumstance either, right? At least to his judgment. So anyway, we can move on. It's very, very dark, very complicated, but at least I think, thank you for the flowers, Norm. I appreciate that. And good morning.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was driving along because I couldn't understand. I mean, I wouldn't even hear it. You were saying it and I'd hear the words and it would pop into my head and bounce around. It wouldn't stick anywhere. And about one exit away down the highway, I thought, oh, you know what? Mike was onto something. So I shot you. Well, I didn't shoot a text while driving. I take the fifth on that. Some avatar using my phone shot a text while driving and said you were right. And so I wanted to acknowledge that here, because headstrong and impetuous that I am, I'm often wrong. And every so often, once a month, maybe once a year, I can be modest enough to say I erred. And so I do.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, talk about this, because you sent me a text about this yesterday as well.
So I don't know if you guys have seen it, but apparently Alex Jones, my client, I have his case on appeal in the Sandy Hook defamation case, is apparently retained or is retaining other lawyers to bring an action against maybe the FBI and the CIA for doing him dirty. And it's all based apparently on an undercover video with Gavin O'Blennis, a contract officer, apparently for the Central Intelligence Agency. It's about a 7-minute video. We've got a link to it here. Give it a view. I don't know what I make of O'Blennis. I mean, O'Blennis, and I have the benefit of knowing certain things about the Alex Jones case because I was involved in it for 4 or 5 years. I don't know that Blennis knows shit from Shinola. And I don't know if he's just out on a date talking smack because he thinks it's going to get him laid or whatever. But he suggests that somehow the intelligence community, that is the deep state, was out to get Alex Jones. Why? They wanted his money. Why? To stop him. Why? Presumably because he's outing the deep state. But they failed because he can't be stopped. So they got his money. He's still talking, and they can't stop him. So what was the purpose of the litigation? He says basically that they nudged others, that they pointed people toward the civil arena in order to bring an action against Jones, because well, why exactly? He doesn't explain a motive. And so I look at O'Blennis. I would not stake a litigation dollar on this video. I would want corroboration of what he had to say. He looks to me like he's talking the same sort of mad, hysterical chatter that fills the internet and the conspiracy theory waves right now. And that is
I can't help but to look at his mannerisms on the screen here. Without the sound, I think we can make certain assumptions about him. And clearly, you know, being so loose-lipped with his, I think the criticism of this video, principally from someone that I think it's obvious that you know our federal law enforcement and national security assets were on the ground on January 6th around the Capitol. I can't, Norm, you're so close to the criminal defense of Joe Biggs and Zach Rell, the Proud Boys that were convicted of seditious conspiracy, that this is an issue that you drove at very, very hard, right, in the court system. And so I'm making certain assumptions about him, how much of a badge he wears, just being a part of, sort of being a part of this. And I don't want to talk too condescendingly about it, but this gentleman clearly it was not part of an in-group during his younger years, and he is certainly predisposed, therefore, to using the badge of a larger agency and a monopoly on violence and intelligence to sort of bridge the gap in his sort of self-esteem and things that he was not able to accomplish in his personal life. And that's why he would be so willing to talk to a perfect stranger and sort of dangle his affiliation with the Central Intelligence Agency and being a contracting officer and dealing with the Department of Homeland Security and the Army and the Navy and so on and so forth, and talk very loosely and haphazardly about what the strategy was for nudging people into protests using social media, and what the strategy was for for hamstringing Alex Jones and going after his finances. This isn't altogether so surprising. I'm just not sure how credible the video is, and that's without any disrespect intended to Sound Investigations. I just think that I'm really sick of this over and over and over and over again thing. This is sort of confirmation bias. Like this is a fertile ground, I'll say, for confirmation bias. And I'm not very impressed by the way that he positions himself in the video. And I like to think that the people that are really on the ground doing things, doing the real work, aren't really out here on coffee dates, trying to brag.
No, and so much of his talk sounds false. It sounds like he's processing what he's read in the world to create a sort of Ferris Bueller or who is it that I can't remember the name of the guy. He wrote a book about playing with the Green Bay Packers. He's living. This is fantasy conspiracy theory for this guy. So here's the story on confidential human sources in the Proud Boys case. And I say this because I tried the Proud Boys case. I've read the documents. I'm aware of what the FBI actually gave us. Now, did they withhold a bunch? Maybe. But there were people who were registered as informants on the ground on January 6th. They had handlers. They had registration numbers. These are typically people who, wanted something from the FBI. George Plimpton, thank you, Markin. They wanted something from the FBI, and the FBI wanted something from them. And so it was a bilateral relationship. They provided information to the FBI on the ground about their percipient, that is, the things they could perceive, their observations. I'm unaware, and I say this as a lawyer for the Proud Boys, I'm unaware of any effort by the federal government to provoke the January 6th attack as a means of covering up a stolen election in 2020. And every time I hear somebody say that, I want to scream, because that sounds like wishful thinking. And it sounds like Gavin O'Blennis here. He is suggesting that the J6 crowd was saturated with federal officials, and that these were probably the same officials who wanted to take Alex Jones down. Why are we talking about him? I guess we're talking about him to raise questions about him. But why do videos like this go viral? What narrative need do they fill? And why are people so inclined to go all in on the talk of a bar room or of a coffee house chatter? The talk of coffee house chatter by a guy I wouldn't buy a used car from, at least based on his demeanor and the way he sounds. So, I guess here's the story. And I hope that Sound Investigations stays on this, because we have a man making.
Well, I brought this page up, Norm, because I wasn't familiar with Sound Investigations before this was published, and I believe it was the Daily Wire that published this, or at least made this go viral, in a manner of speaking. But just a quick look at soundinvestigations.com's webpage. There isn't any about section. There isn't any way to learn any more about who may be running that. And I understand that, you need sort of the veil of anonymity, but there's also not very much here. As much as I can get to is September 13th of 23. And this appears to be the first real story that has made.
So, I mean, and my fear is it's a clickbait site. We're trying to monetize Law and Legitimacy right now, folks. And I mean, let's be honest, we would like to generate an income stream about this so that we could spend more time investigating, talking about, explaining the world as we see it. But we're not going to tell you that what we see is what it is. We are going to tell you that this is our perception based on the data that we have, and we'll disclose to you the source of the data, which is why Mike makes a point of putting pleadings on the page when we discuss them. This is the data. These are the conclusions we've drawn from it. We're open to the possibility that there are other conclusions. We're not going to leap to the conclusion that our initial perceptions are the way it is and defend the narrative and attack everybody who attacks our narrative as a conspiracy theorist working for the deep state. Aristotle said in the Politics that one of the defining characteristics of citizenship was the capacity to deliberate. We ask jurors to deliberate in a slightly different form in jury trials. And what deliberations means is inspection of evidence, inspection of data, following instructions on the law, and then reasoning together with others to reach joint conclusions. That's the task of civil society. That's the task of a jury in rendering a verdict. That's the task of a people living together collectively, trying to reach a common understanding about their interests and conceptions of right. And the reason we're having a legitimacy crisis in the country right now is in part because of these half-assed conspiracy theorists like this guy on the line on the page here. They're taking a whiff of data, reaching conclusions that serve a need for recognition, and then running with it and taking validation from the clickbait they get, saying, look, all these people believe me, I must be right. Maybe all these people believe you because you're persuasive. Maybe all these people believe you because they're gullible. Maybe you're all wrong. Maybe you're all lemmings jumping off a cliff. We've talked before about cognitive dissonance. That is a gap between how we behave and how we live, or how we speak. And I think our politics are characterized by cognitive dissonance right now. And we need to find a way to ensoul our bodies. And what do I mean by that? We need to find a way to have spiritual, intellectual, moral significance in our own skin, in our own communities, in an intersubjective way that we can communicate with others and build a sense of community. Otherwise, we're going to continue to tear at ourselves in ways that are simply destructive, in ways that don't contribute to the common good. And so what we try to do, at least here in Law and Legitimacy, is model what a critical inquiry and an interrogation of the present and of the past looks like. Share it with you. And our hope is that you will share these videos with others and it will create a discussion. People will say, stop, not so fast. I'm unwilling to run and jump off the edge of that cliff because I'm afraid I might not be able to climb back up it once I'm at the bottom of it. So, folks, we spent a little bit of time on this fellow. What's his name again, Mike? I'm sorry.
I don't even know, and I don't really.
I'd ask Alex Jones, to go easy. I mean, I'm not representing him in this. I don't want to be
Gavin O'Blennis. Gavin O'Blennis.
But I want to know more about Gavin O'Blennis, and so this is a call out to those of you with a few minutes to learn more. Who is this guy? And is this? And I pity. If that's how. If let's say he's out there on a date, and let's say you're looking for love. And let's say you're looking for companionship and you meet this guy. I mean, holy cow, what is wrong with the world? So anyhow, let's move on.
Yeah, and look, I think I want to be at least mindful of, I think a legitimate criticism of this stream, and no offense, Norm, but I think more of you than me, but it's only because I haven't had the benefit of trust in American institutions the same that you've had over the course of your life. Although both of my parents were in law enforcement during my formative years, I've had plenty of reason throughout my life to put my trust and faith in the institutions in the country. And I have plenty of reasons still to have faith and hope for our institutions. I'm a practicing lawyer, right? And we both are. However, I think that there is a real appetite, almost an insatiable appetite, I would say, at this point, because of the seeming imperviousness, if that's a word, Norm, of the what we call the deep state, or that professional bureaucracy that does not change with ingoing and outgoing presidential administrations, and that has grown to a size and scope, and at this point, a certain hostility toward uh, citizens of the country that have just really given way. I think I said fertile ground earlier with respect to the other with the attorney story, but here as well, conspiracy theories abound where there is some mania about the true nature and character and the motives of once trusted institutions, and it's only because we do imbue law enforcement agencies and the government, state, federal, with that monopoly on violence and the administration of justice. And to the extent the CIA and the FBI have turned their sights inward on a really large percentage of the American population, those that have historically been the most patriotic, the most loyal, and the most dutiful to the country, that I think that is as simple as I can make it in terms of where this criticism and curiosity resides. I just simply think that in these circumstances, I just have this weird intuition, maybe a spidey sense, that this is more of a distraction than it is.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. Hey, so while we're on the topic of things that are bad for the country, I'm developing a side thing, I suppose. I've become a dinner speaker at various events. I've done it a couple times in the last month, and I enjoy it. And you want me to speak to your organization at a dinner event, call my office. We're going to charge you because I'm not cheap. But I enjoy the opportunity to talk to others about what we see in the country and to hear what they have to say. So the other day, this is a funny story. I was invited to speak to the New Haven Ladies Aid Society. And I thought, okay, I'll go. They asked me what I wanted for dinner. Salmon and salad's good for me. I don't have to cook. I'm happier than that. So I walk into the meeting expecting to see a bunch of old women because it's the New Haven Ladies Aid Society. What I see are a bunch of old men. And I'm like, is this the New Haven Ladies Aid Society? Oh, yes. Okay, I was expecting to see women. Well, we formed this about 100 years ago.
We're very progressive.
we identify as women, and then cadet, whatever her name, Ketanji Brown or whatever her name is, wanders in and says, "What's a woman?" It's a stand-up comedy routine. But the anecdote was that these were old New England types who on Thursday evenings gave the women in their lives a night off, whether they were housekeepers, cooks, or wives, and got together to break bread with one another. So they were aiding the ladies by giving them the night off. And so, I got to talk to them a little bit about the cases that I'm involved in, the controversies that I'm involved in. And we actually started to talk about, and one of the special topics they asked me to talk about was New Haven's removal of the Christopher Columbus statue from a public square incident to the 2020 things with George Floyd. And so I, started to talk about reparations and this notion that somehow there can be identity-based justice. That we owe people certain things on account of their skin color. And to a man, everybody in that room was hostile to it. Now, of course, we're all possessors in that meeting of white male privilege. All, I think, every one of us 60 or over, and of various professional attainments, neurosurgeons, doctors, lawyers, bankers, the power brokers, as it were, of the old blue blood New England. And so, it was interesting to see how these fellows reacted. But their view was one of hostility toward identity politics, and I felt very much among friends when we talked about the need to avoid race-based transfer payments. And so today we read, that there's now a proposal from Jasmine Crockett, a New York lawmaker, that perhaps the way to deal with reparations is to...
She is a Texas-based lawmaker.
Sorry about that. I can't read my notes. A Texas-based lawmaker, thank you. To avoid, to say that people of color, maybe they shouldn't have to pay taxes for a while. They should get a free ride. The common obligations of citizenship should be forgiven them while we strive to make sure that everybody's condition is equal.
Norm, I worry here that you're going to make her position sound a bit more sophisticated than it actually is. So why don't we just let her, just rain poetry upon us with respect to race-based transfer payments and her.
So we're going to have a corn pone moment here.
What do you think? What do you think? You want to do that?
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
This past week, I saw, I don't remember which celebrity, but it was actually a celebrity. And I was like, I don't know. Just this past week, I saw, I don't remember which celebrity, but it was actually a celebrity. And I was like, I don't know that that's not necessarily a bad idea, but I'd have to think through it a lot. One of the things that they propose is Black folk not have to pay taxes for a certain amount of time, because then again, that puts money back in your pocket. But at the same time, it may not be as objectionable to some people about actually giving out dollars. But obviously, then you start dealing with the different tax brackets and things like that. And that's one of the reasons that, we argue the reparations make sense, because so many Black folk, not only do you owe for the labor that was stolen and killed and all the other things, right? But the fact is, like, we end up being so far behind, right? And so it's like, how do you bring forth people? Exactly. And so it's like, if you do the no tax thing for people that are already, say, struggling and aren't really paying taxes in the first place, it doesn't really exactly.
They may want those checks like they got.
Give me a break. I'm an old white male who inherited in the course of his life precisely $5,000 from his dead parents. Does that give me a leg up, Congresswoman? Certainly I'm an old white male who comes from a lumpen proletarian background. That is, people who didn't even graduate high school, who clawed my way to the top of my profession. Did I get here because I'm white, or did I get here because I worked hard? And you're going to tell me that because, in some version of Roots, the fictional television series that played in the 70s or 80s, and you've read about the suffering of your ancestors, that somehow I owe you something, that I need to carry you in the name of social justice, that until you arrive at a position of equality with the position I've worked for, until I give you that, somehow the world's not going to be a safe and harmonious place. We just need to stop this business and talk about people as possessing equal dignity, equal worth. The best way to, one of the best ways I think to view social justice, quite frankly, is through the prism of John Rawls' theory of justice. He talked about people when they come to a critical juncture where they have to decide how to distribute some limited good, they go behind a veil of ignorance and they say, look, I don't know what position I'm going to have in society, but I could have the best, I could have the worst. And there are going to be differences between the best and the worst. Because I don't know whether I'll be in the best or worst, I'm going to set limits in the name of justice on what one can or can't have. That's a better way of doing it than saying identity, identity, identity. At least that's principled, it's rational. It places citizens on a position of parity with one another, bargaining about what the law should be in a deliberative process, and building a sense of community. Reparations strikes me as a zero-sum game. It strikes me
is. Yeah,
and the zero-sum game can't help but to create a zero-sum game is where one person wins and the other person loses, and that's not going to create social cohesion. It's just not going to do it.
No, and then the companion story that I've put on the screen here talks about the push in New York behind it, the formation of its reparations commission by Governor Kathy Hochul. The aim right now is to ensure that the likes of Citibank and JP Morgan, those that historically have records of taking slaves as collateral for certain loan payments. And then I think in the case of JP Morgan, they apparently own some 1,000 or more slaves at one point in its history. Citibank has, and in 2005, I believe they put out a public statement to that effect, sort of acknowledging that. But what we're arriving here at, Norm, you talked about, equal dignity. And I do believe principally that the catalyst for reparations is leaving the sense, a real sense of personal dignity behind, right? I don't know that we agree as a nation on how much is enough. what the American dream really is, nor should we really be wagering what that is on a collective basis, because one of the beautiful components of our coveted republic is that personal sovereignty and what used to be a total freedom to live the life that one chooses to live, and whatever material means that may bring, right? In this case, this seems like a bottomless well, right? That if, that there is a burgeoning push and consensus around this incessant need to pay reparations. But as you've pointed out, I think pretty astutely before, Norm, is that none of those who would stand to receive payments have ever been enslaved, and none of those from whom payments would come have ever owned a slave. And that big foundational proposition, I think, is what needs to be dealt with, I think, honestly. And we've also seen that reparations are widely unpopular across the country, despite these continued pushes. I think that these are interest groups that continue to lobby and to push this. What irritates me more than anything is, despite how wildly unpopular and also illogical and unreasonable the results of these certain commissions ultimately are, the media continues to surface these stories and push these narratives into widely circulated mainstream publications. So anyway.
Well, all right. So there we have it. We've talked our way through another half an hour of your life, and thank you for giving it to us. Tomorrow we'll talk more. I've got to rush off. I'm on trial in Danbury today. We have a motions hearing in a very complex fraud trial that will begin in a week or so. So I need to get on the road, and I want to thank all of you for tuning in today.
We've got, we'll hit the Arizona Supreme Court ruling on abortion tomorrow, and I think we'll also, I don't know if we'll hit this tomorrow, but I am certainly just fascinated by Trump's visit to the Atlanta, Georgia Chick-Fil-A yesterday. I think I've called Chick-fil-A, and then the overlap with Trump is bringing us infinite symbolism of what maybe modern politics looks like in a moderate sense, especially in the context of abortion, especially in context of the sort of DEI, LGBTQIA plus cultural rot that we are living through right now. I love everything about that story. I love the reaction, the videos. I also love that Trump has taken a position on abortion that ostensibly creates room for Republicans to begin winning if we can get out of our own way. And I say we. I'm a registered independent, but obviously I don't think that there's any other. I don't think that there's any other side to this. But ultimately, the Chick-fil-A story, we might not hit it tomorrow, Norm, but I'd love to talk about it if we had time.
All right. Well, listen, AMF Yo-Yo, it's time for us to go deal with our stuff and be lawyers. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 9. Or at 8 rather, excuse me. Let's keep talking. Let's keep building.
Careful, Don. Duh. Isn't that what Trump is?
Yeah.
Like I said, infinite symbolism. Anyway.
Let's keep building a community we want to live in. The online world doesn't have to be crazy. It can be warm. It can be genuine. It can deal with matters of the heart, soul, mind, and spirit, and body politic, all in one conversation. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Norm. AMF Yo-Yo. You can find us here every Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern Time at LawPod Daily on YouTube, Rumble, and on X. You can also find the audio-only versions of this stream on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, wherever you find premium podcasts. Wherever you are, please like, subscribe, and share. That means a tremendous amount to us. Thank you to the new viewers that have come in over the last several weeks or so, from the likes of Joe over at Good Logic and Eric over at Laid Back Law. We love y'all, but most importantly, Norm, I think we're doing something really good here. So go on, get to court. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
Ciao. Bye.
Bye.